Is there going to be an individual I divert or I put into treatment program who's going to go out and kill somebody? You bet. Guaranteed. It's gonna happen. End of his quote. Well, still with us is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and Newsmax analyst Alan Dershowitz. And joining us is City University of New York Law Professor and host of Jeff Lax Live. Jeff Lax. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to start with you because we're discussing this no bail, we should have bail. The White House came down and doubled down today that said, hey, we need to have no bail. They also said we shouldn't be basing bail off of what's in people's wallets. It should be based off of their merit. But if you look at this guy, Darrell Brooks, his merit shouldn't have allowed him out on the streets. So one, break down no bail versus bail for us. And why does there seem to be a disparity where they want to base this off of equity, but if you look at people's records, they shouldn't have been out on the streets, specifically this guy?
You're exactly right. And Professor Dershowitz was right when he said there's no problem with our legal system. There's a problem with our media system. 100% right. And this is the best example of it because Rob made a point before the break, which was exactly right. Why wasn't his bail either much higher or no bail at all? And what's the first thing they're supposed to look at, a prosecutor and a judge, when you're deciding whether to offer bail at all or to make it astronomically high? You look at, is the person a high flight risk? And lo and behold, you look at Mr. Brooks, he was already charged with jumping bail. I mean, that's the number one thing. So of course he should not. Rob was 100% right. He never should have been granted bail. And you look at the second thing, even more disturbing than the jumping of bail, is the fact that he'd already hit a woman with a car. Nobody has asked, I haven't heard this question, was his license revoked? Did he actually have a driver's license when he was driving this car? Because the two most obvious things to me is what Rob pointed out. There should have not been bail for someone who's already jumped bail, and a license should have been revoked. He never should have been in possession of a car after hitting someone with a car.
I mean, you look at the charges. I mean, it goes on from there. The first guest we had said it was like 30 pages of charges. I mean, this guy should not be allowed to be free in any capacity to begin with. He's a horrible person, Professor Dershowitz. I think everybody agrees on that. He gets let out for $1,000 after he does yet another horrible crime and a list of horrible crimes. The question is, do district attorneys have too much power in the criminal justice system? Because if you have one ideologue like this guy, Chisholm, comes along and can make decisions like this, I mean, this decision has cost 6 people their lives.
We're the only country in the history of the Western world that has ever elected prosecutors. Of course, every prosecutor wants to be a senator and a governor. So, A, they have too much power, and B, they're too concerned about what the public will think. I've been writing about bail reform since 1966, before any of you were born, and I have always been in cash bail. Bail should be determined not on the basis of whether you can raise $100 or $1,000, because that keeps too many poor people who are not dangerous in prison, and it allows too many poor people and rich people who are extremely dangerous to get out of prison. It should be based on what was been said previously, flight risk, danger to the community, but not on your ability to raise the money. That has almost nothing to do with how dangerous you are, how likely you are to flee, and how likely you are to commit crime. So yes, bail reform is good, but not the way it's being done now. We have to have a new bail system which focuses on dangerousness, flight, the history. Under that system, this guy would never have been let out on bail, even if he could raise $10 million. So it shouldn't be based on how much cash you have in your pocket. It should be based on your record, on what you're charged with, what the likelihood is of you committing new crimes.
Professor, I wish that you were advising the White House on what their criminal justice reform should look like, because it sounds like you have a lot of sense in there. But Jeff, I want to talk to you about this. So we talk about these district attorneys and them having too much power in the positions that they're in. It goes back to someone like George Soros, who is funding the left's ideology of criminal justice reform, getting these liberal DAs into the system. I mean, there is a long laundry list of people, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, the Bronx, DAs that George Soros has helped elect, get in, his money backing them. Do you think people need to be paying more attention to this in upcoming elections?
Well, it seems to me that what the far left is doing here is when they can't do it the democratic way, and how is the democratic way? You do it through legislation. If you want bail reform, if you want criminal justice reform, you get public support. That's how it's been for 250 years in this country, and you enact legislation. We have state legislatures who do these things. We have federal obviously Congress and the Senate who work on these things. And it seems to me what's happening here with people like Soros funding, what they're trying to do is go around the way it's worked for hundreds of years beautifully well, and instead get district attorneys who have a lot of discretion, like you said, to flout the actual laws and guidelines in terms of sentencing and charging. Can I just point out one thing that to me is absolutely stunning that the district attorney did here? You have a guy now who's accused of purposely ramming a car into 6 people, killing 6 people, and he's charged with exactly the same crime as Kyle Rittenhouse, first-degree intentional homicide.
Right.
That is a disgrace that those crimes are being charged in the same way to begin with. And that's discretion, and that's flouting our guidelines and what our system actually is.
Yeah.
Look,
Professor Dershowitz, real quick, I just want to get in one thing with the professor because we don't have a lot of time. We got about 30 seconds left. But the Oklahoma State Senator Nathan Dahm has filed legislation that's called Kyle's Law, and it's named after Rittenhouse. It seeks to compensate defendants of malicious prosecution if they're charged with murder but later found to be not guilty due to justifiable homicide, aka self-defense. Professor, what do you make of that?
No, I think that's good. I think people who have been charged falsely should be compensated. We know people who've been wrongly convicted are compensated, and that makes a lot of sense. Look, these are not liberals that we're talking about now. I'm a liberal. I think we're talking about radical leftists who see the criminal justice system through the lens of intersectionality, through the lens of racial politics, through the lens of ideology. There's nothing wrong with liberal reform. I think liberal bail reform is a good idea, and it shouldn't be sacrificed to the radicals who would want to destroy the system rather than just change it.
Yeah. Biggest problem that your party has right now is where the far left is taking your party. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to see you both. We appreciate it. Good conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Well, coming